Hi, everybody. I know I spoke to some of you about this, but not everybody. I completely missed the American folklore chapter of our social studies curriculum this year. So I wanted to share some of these stories with you and talk about American folklore. So our basic essential question, here's our question that we're going to ask when we talk about these. How does folklore reflect the beliefs and ideals of a culture? So when we think about American folklore, this is just folklore that started in our country. We're not talking about world stories. We're talking about American stories right now. So here are our objectives. We're going to recognize famous fictional characters from American folklore. Fiction means not real. But some of the things that we are talking about with American folklore are real people, like Johnny Appleseed that we already talked about this year. So how is it, so when they talk about fictional characters, they may be based on a real person, but the stories grow and grow and grow until they are considered fiction. Not all the things you might hear about Johnny Appleseed really happened. Remember we talked about tall tales and how stories can grow and change over time, so that there's a lot of things that aren't real anymore. We will talk about some of the periods in history that are reflected in these folk tales. We've already talked about Johnny Appleseed. That's why I'm starting with him, because we've already talked about him a lot during the year. Here are the things that you should know. A folk tale is a story or legend that becomes part of an oral tradition. Oral means mouth. So these aren't always written down. This is talked about from parent to child. Generations, they've talked about it, and then somebody writes it down. So these are stories that are passed down from person to person to person. Folklore and fictional characters from the United States provide a common thread that enables people from different cultures to feel connected. So what's the same about all these stories is it belongs to the American people. It gave people from different places a common story to tell. So that's something that's important about American folklore. Also, we have a lot of different cultures coming together in our country, in America. And it's nice to hear about different stories that bring us together as people. And in times of conflict, people turn to folklore as a way to unify a community or a culture. So American folklore has been important to American people through the years. We're going to read a bunch of different stories about a bunch of different American folk heroes. And we already read about Johnny Appleseed, so I'll start here. We read that big long chapter book about Johnny Appleseed. This is just a story. And it says, who is that walking by the Ohio River? Apple-loving Johnny. Yes, Johnny Appleseed. He carries a bag. He carries a hoe. He digs a hole by his left big toe. He drops a seed into the hole. He pats the soft black bed. Soon the rains will pitter-patter down, and a green baby tree will poke out its little head. Who is that walking by the Ohio? Apple-loving Johnny. Yes, Johnny Appleseed. He carries a bag full of baby trees. People ask, may I have one, please? What do you have to trade, says he. Will you take a pan? Yes. Will you take a ham? Yes. Will you take a shirt? Yes. Will you take some dirt? Yes. Who is that walking by the Ohio? Apple-loving Johnny. Yes, Johnny Appleseed. He hands something shiny to a hopping girl. The girl bites in and says, "Oh, sweet." Nobody cares that his clothes are funny. Nobody chuckles at his big bare feet. There's the whole picture. I didn't want to cut off that pot on his head there. They all work hard with their plows on their farms. They get sore backs. They get sore arms. At the end of the day, they can come inside and bite into an apple or a sweet apple pie. Clap your hands for Johnny. Clap your hands for Johnny Chapman. Clap your hands for Johnny Appleseed. Do you remember when we read that big chapter book about Johnny Appleseed? A lot of what we learn about Johnny Appleseed is true. We read about his family, about the brothers and sisters that he had. Those things were all true. The fact that he walked across planting apples as he went, that is also true. But some of the things, maybe some of the tall tales about encountering bears or some of the things that you might hear about Johnny Appleseed may be exaggerated or tall tale. We are going to learn about some other folk heroes and some other tall tales the next time. I have a challenge if you're looking for a summer challenge, a Johnny Appleseed challenge. Try to construct a raft using sticks and some kind of string. So if you find some sticks in your yard, you can put them together and make a raft. Tie it together. See what you can do with just some sticks and some string, and see if you can float an apple on your raft. See if you can make a raft that will float a real apple. That's my Johnny Appleseed challenge. If you do it, take a picture and email it to me if you would like. I hope you enjoyed this story about Johnny Appleseed. I know we've read it before, and remember that apple seed that was growing? I planted it I have a big pot with all different plants in it, and I put my Johnny Appleseed, my new Johnny Appleseed in there. So here it is. Take a look. Do you see? That's my apple seed. That's the one that I planted that finally grew. It's right here. And take a look here. Do you know what this is? Do you remember when we grew the Poe? We made the new plant from an old plant. Well, it's growing. All the different ones that I have, I planted in here in my big pot with all sorts of different plants. Here's original Poe. Poe's hanging out by the window. But I thought I'd show you Johnny Appleseed. There it is. I'm wondering if I can grow an apple tree in my house. I hope you had fun learning about Johnny Appleseed. I'll see you for the next American folk hero.